Good morning, and here's the morning news. The federal government says the nation's march to greatness is just a matter of time as it is keeping with the implementation of the next level agenda. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while inaugurating one of the road projects executed under the restoration agenda of the Masari administration in Katsina State.
Well done, Katsina State. I look forward to hearing sharing news in the not too distant future that these roads have become a robust catalyst for the rapid social economic transformation of the affected rural communities. May I urge you not to relent in ensuring that rural communities in need of this kind of infrastructural development are given the attention they deserve.
And President Muhammadu Buhari is urging Nigerians, especially victims of the various acts of criminality in the country, to exercise patience and keep faith with his administration's genuine efforts aimed at bringing to an end the worrisome situation. This was during a visit to Basari in Katsina State to meet with those adversely affected by what he called the senseless killings, maiming, and destruction of property by armed bandits in the area.
Da yarda Allah za mu yi amfani da sojoji da 'yan sanda da sauran ma'aikatan gwamnati mu ga bayansu insha Allah.
The recent deployment of additional security personnel and the equipment to this area has led to the drastic reduction in the frequency of the attacks. But there are still sporadic attacks with attendant kidnap and cattle rustling incidents.
The Joint Security Panel to investigate circumstances surrounding killings of 3 police officers and a civilian by soldiers in Ibe local government area of Taraba State has commenced investigation. The 7-man panel, headed by Rear Admiral Olaiya, who declined to speak to newsmen, paid a visit to the state governor, Darius Ishaku, where it held a closed-door meeting with the governor. The joint panel included representatives of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Police, and the Department of State Security, DSS, as well as Defense Intelligence Agency. A similar committee constituted by the Inspector General of Police had earlier visited the state and scene of the incident. It will be recalled that the National Security Council, presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari, had directed full investigation into the matter. The Nigerian prisons is now to be known and addressed as Nigerian Correctional Service. This is sequel to the signing into law of the bill amending the act establishing the Nigerian Prison Service by President Muhammadu Buhari, as amended by the Senate, tagged Nigerian Correctional Service Act 2019.
The Correctional Services Act repeals the Nigeria Prison Service, changes the name of Nigeria Prison Service to Nigeria Correctional Service.
Now, the Indian authorities have indicated willingness to return Ibrahim El-Zakzaky to Nigeria following his antics, unruly and uncompromising attitude since he arrived the country for medical treatment. The Indian authorities, apart from his refusal to be admitted to hospital for treatment as is indicated on his visa, he has, amongst other unacceptable demands, insisted on checking in at a 5-star hotel, receiving of unrestricted number of visitors, and movement choosing doctors of his choice to check him, and the return of his international passport and withdrawal of police protection. The Indian government therefore says it will not allow El-Zakzaky use the country to internationalize his group's activities. While commending the state of the Indian government on the issue, Nigeria has apologized to India for the unruly behavior of El-Zakzaky and reaffirmed its readiness to undertake the prosecution of El-Zakzaky through due process if and when he is returned to the country. The statement by the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Information and Culture, Grace Isugepe, asked the public to note that El-Zakzaky cry that he's been held in circumstances worse than he was in Nigeria should be disregarded. The Borno state government has restated commitment to providing security for farmers on their farmlands so as to improve agricultural production. The state governor, Professor Babagana Omar Zulum, stated this while inaugurating officers and men of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps alongside members of civilian JTF, hunters as well as vigilantes and agro-rangers.
We'll rather increase our commitment and resilience until we emerge victorious, inshallah.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Claire and Juma after this break. Good morning.
Protocol and event management are special skills which can only be acquired through training and experience. NTA TV College JOS is organizing a special 2-week course on protocol, event management, and public relations to upgrade the capacities of practitioners. The course will equip participants with modern skills, techniques, and international best practices in protocol, event management, and public relations. Also, a special 4-week intensive course on non-linear editing techniques will run concurrently. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of non-linear editing. Take advantage of this course to hone your professional skills for premium packaging of your programs and reports. The venue for both courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos, Plateau State. Date 19th to 30th August 2019 for the course on protocol, event management, and public relations. 19th August to 13th September 2019 for basic non-linear editing techniques. Course fee 100,000 naira only per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more information, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College JOS, training you to be the best you want to be.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live in Abuja. And on business news, issues arising from tax management and collections may soon be a thing of the past through the renewed efforts by the Tax Appeal Tribunal. Chimobi Walter Naji is our guide.
Disputes arising from taxation oftentimes remain a challenge for both taxpayers and collectors as continued litigation hamper the growth of tax system in Nigeria. To further strengthen the tax system in the country, the Tax Appeal Panel is positioned towards addressing the challenges and granting quick solutions to such disputes. The tribunal is looking towards sharpening its efforts and creating public confidence in the tax system and dispute resolution.
Or where the tax authority has sent an assessment or has identified issues around income, either disclosed or under-disclosed by the taxpayer, and there are delays in agreeing after issues around notice of or disapproval of assessment or otherwise have been exhausted. They can now come to the tribunal. And the whole of it is to create a situation whereby there is fairness, there is a speedy process of resolving the dispute, and also in a manner that is affordable to the taxpayer.
Meanwhile, the losing streak on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange continued at the close of trade Wednesday on the floor of the equities as investors lose by minus 0.82%. Next is a graphic representation of Wednesday's closing figures. With business news, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live here on the Africa's largest TV network. That's the NTA. Newspaper review is coming up shortly.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Ateobis, is in the studio. Welcome to Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you, Juma. Good morning. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigeria.
Bayo, good to see you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm seeing you for the first time after the
after
Salah
Eid al-Fitr,
holidays.
yes.
Hope you had a good time.
I did. And you?
You're
busy working.
Well,
that's what broadcasting is about.
Yes.
Indeed. All right, let's start off. Jume?
We'll start with the Daily Trust newspaper, just below the masthead. Families of slain policemen, civilian demand justice. You find that on page 3. Nigerian prison service gets new name. Page 3. Nigeria spent 40 trillion on food imports in 21 years. That's quite alarming, and you find that on page 20. The bold headlines there, Zazaki FG bicker over Indian treatment. With riders, why I am not comfortable, IMN leader. He wants to stay in a 5-star hotel, says the PAMSEC. Indian government reacts. And the picture story there, Pakistani soldiers rescued from the burning ship MT Voyager by officers of the Nigerian Navy ship Ekulu off Lagos anchorage yesterday. Glad they are safe. And at the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, soldiers shoot, stabbed 2 people to death. That's the police. You find that on page 22. How petition against kidnap kingpin prompted police action. That's on page 12. And money laundering, Atiku's son-in-law, associate remanded. That's on page 4. Claire?
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the blueprint, also leading with the story on El Zakzaki. And it reads, El Zakzaki gets ultimatum, and the lead story, be treated or return home. That's coming from the Indian government. It comes with some riders there. Medical trip, another detention, that's the IMM leader, and he wants VIP treatment, orders not granted by court. That's coming from the federal government. Will resolve all issues, IHRC. You can see the details of that story on page 6, and indeed all the papers we have here this morning all carry stories on El Zakzaki. To other trending stories on the front page of the blueprint, you take a look at the picture story there. You find the president being assisted by Governor Aminu Bello Masuri of Katsina, carrying an internally displaced person's kid there during his visit to one of the IDP camps in Katsina State. That was on Wednesday. And on the other side, you'll find a group of protesting TIV and civil society organizations for the arrest and prosecution of politicians allegedly sponsoring violence in Benue and Taraba states. That took place at the Unity Fountain in Abuja yesterday. And just below that, you find story on Taraba killings, police embarking on media trial, CSO. Details of that on pages 5. Let me take you just a little below the nameplate. It says, be strategic. Experts caution President Buhari on food sufficiency claim. And that story on prisons service now, correctional service. You can find the details of that on page 5. Now, stock market loses 109 billion naira. It's on page 33. And UNICEF certifies 560 Katsina communities open defecation free. That's a good one there. It's on page 7. Before we take other stories from other papers, Bayo, which of these stories, I'm sure the El Zakzaki is trending?
Yes, it's trending because the Sheikh has declared that his conditioning in India is worse than what he experienced in Nigeria. He alleges that he has not been allowed to see the doctor who visited him and recommended the Indian hospital. He alleges that the United States government and the federal government are frustrating his treatment. Well, meanwhile, the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Information, Grace Gakwe, has put a perspective on the developments. The Indian authorities have, in fact, actually indicated that they are willing to return Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki to Nigeria with immediate effect. This is because he has been making demands. His demands are 4. First, he says he wants a doctor of his choice, and the Indian doctors say that, no, you cannot insist and dictate to us about doctors. Secondly, he demanded to be moved and have access to visitors of all kinds. They said no, they cannot concede to that. He also requested to check into a 5-star hotel instead of admission in the hospital. And he was told that he came here on a medical visa and not a tourist visa, and therefore he would not be allowed. The other fourth demand he made was that the police protection be withdrawn so that he will feel free. This also was declined. In fact, en route to India, he was said to have demanded for his passport from the security personnel handling him, but those one too declined. Meanwhile, the Indian government says that as far as they are concerned, they fear that he could internationalize his group activities in India, and therefore they are determined, if he's still insisting on his conditions, they are ready to return him to Nigeria. So those are the consequent development happen there.
So let's look at the Punch newspaper. The bold headlines there says FG to pay on failed investors 736 billion naira to repossess discos, with riders 11 distribution firms declared technically insolvent. Review power sale but don't politicize exercise. That's coming from Ekan. Counseling sale will come with contingent liability, says TCN MD. And the picture story there, members of Guardians of Democracy and Development during a protest on insecurity and killing in Taraba State at the Unity Fountain, Abuja, on Wednesday. And just below the masthead, at the bottom plate, flooding. Bauchi Governor Saad appeals to contractors. Find that on page 42. Labour seeks Buhari's intervention on minimum wage. We find that on page 13. Gunmen kidnap another Kaduna pastor, demand 20 million. That's on page 19. And then the Exazaki story there. Army, police disagree as drunk soldiers kill 3. You find that on page 4 and 5. Troops uncover another gun.
For Ruga, and I'm sure one of our viewer and our guests on Good Morning Nigeria actually posted that to me yesterday and said, look, this probably would have emanated from, the discussion we had on Good Morning Nigeria on the need to put our, forestry into proper use. Yes, viable use. I know you'll speak to that, but I also like you to speak to the issue of the change of name of, the prison service into a correctional service.
It's even more likable, it even sounds better in the
it's the trend
air,
around
actually.
the world,
Yes.
because prisons are not supposed to be punitive now. They are the orientation is to make them reformatory. In fact, I was shocked when I saw a clip about prison in Norway.
Yeah. Yes.
I was shocked.
They have
air conditioning, they have refrigerators.
The food is good.
And then the tendency is that you won't want to get out of the place.
No, but the irony, Bayo, is that Norway prisons don't have prisoners anymore.
Yes.
They are empty.
Yes.
What I've always suggested is, why don't there are cases that do not need to go, be taken to prison to do fighting, for instance. Why should you go to prison? There are correctional places where you what do they call it? Community services. Maybe over 6 years and all that. I think if implemented, it will go a long way in reducing the stress on our prisons. Actually,
Bayo, you're not a psychologist or a sociologist. I would have asked, change of name, actually, what psychological impact does it have? Because that's probably is the prompt for the change of name.
Well, change of name, fine. Call a rose whatever name, but it will smell as sweet as it should be. But it's not just the change in name. It is the kind of orientation that you give in there. There are prisons in this country, if you see the kind of handiwork, the training they have, and some of the products they are churning out, you see that by the time they leave that penitentiary, they will be productive on their own, so that they will not be tempted to go back to crime again. So the objective is not just in the name alone, but in the policy to make sure that while you are there in the correctional institution, you learn something that will take you away from life on the street.
Some even have their degrees in prison.
Yes. In fact, the last jam that was had, you have some of them who participated. School certificate. Some have even produced very high scores.
Yes.
It will interest you. There was somebody who was jailed somewhere in Ibadan, and he has been playing football in prison. And he was lucky he has been released, and he's aspiring to wear green, white, green jerseys to represent Nigeria. He's so good in football now.
Baya, quickly, speak also to the issue of the Borno donating Sambisa forest.
The papers that have reported it as Ruga have been tongue-in-cheek, so to say. You will recall that the federal government says that the Ruga policy has been put on suspension. What the Borno state government did was the inauguration of what they called forest guards, members of the Nigeria Civil Defense Corps, 75 of them that have been trained, and they are going to serve with the policy of the Rural Grazing Area Program, not Ruga. It has nothing to do with Ruga. By the way, Ruga was the proposal of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture by way of translating the rural program. But when it became controversial, the president directed that it should be suspended. But under the rural grazing program, there are 7 frontline states and 6 voluntary states, making 13 that have all subscribed and are ready to participate in the program. Meanwhile, the governor, in fact, alluded to that, Professor Babagana Zulum. He referred to that and said, grazing has been age-long with Nigeria, and begin to wonder why it has now become a subject of politicization.
Yes, exactly.
That's what he says.
Yes. Just before I quickly take the stories from New Telegraph, Jume read the headline on the front page of The Punch. Jume, could you read that again so that Bayo could speak to it?
They say FG to pay failed investors 736 billion to repossess discourse.
Yeah, you know, there was this privatization, and the privatization apparently has not been going on well. And you also recollect that the president has also questioned that, where is the 16 billion that was spent on this power project, and still Nigeria is experiencing darkness. And there have been proposals too that government should repossess these electricity companies, discos, gencos that were privatized. Now, what you have there is the cost implication if federal government is to have repossess those things. But the other story that I thought will interest you is that the development from Kano, where you have women rice processing at Bunkure local government area, they said if they have adequate support and patronage from government and the public, they can compete favorably with rice millers all anywhere in the country. They were empowered by a company that is called Sasakawa Africa. They made provisions for facilities for them, and their program is going on. And you had this, I think it's a foreign company headed by one Fumini Koiseki, who visited Kano, and he said they are doing very well, and they have thrown a challenge. And you recall that there was a report Juma read there about stopping importation. The president gave that directive to the central bank that presently there is food sufficiency, and so there's no need to expend our hard-earned currency, particularly foreign exchange, for food importation.
Okay, I have the editorial, and it's taken from the Blueprint, and it's an interesting one. It's captioned, Kyari and the task to fix refineries. Just a paragraph. Nigerians may soon heave a sigh of relief if the vow by the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, Malam Mele Kyari, comes to fruition. And what is that vow? That the new NNPC, said by the end of the Buhari administration in 2023, all the 4 refineries will be working, and the country will become a net exporter of petroleum products. This is a daunting but not insurmountable task.
Yes, we have all been lamenting that we are an oil-producing nation, one of the top in the world, I think the 7th in the world, yes. And we have 4 refineries, but we still import petrol. Ghana there has 1 refinery built, I think, in 1956. They have never imported a drum of petrol from where. And the GMD of the NNPC, Mele Kyari, says that as a petroleum engineer, he feels ashamed that we are oil producing and are still importing petrol. And he has said that by 2023, he has promised that 90%, all the 4 refineries will have been working at 90% capacity. Not only that, he also said that there is a target that has been set set by the federal government, and that is a target of crude oil production of 3 million barrels a day, and also to have a reserve, crude reserve of 40 billion barrels, and he says all these are realizable. So the challenge is what he has said, and the editorial is holding him to his word that we wish you all the best, but we look to it by 2023 that all these promises will have been fulfilled.
All right.
I hope so.
We keep our fingers crossed, and of course we wish him the best of luck. He's been there for a while, so he should know what he's talking about, and we can only wish him well, in the course of realizing his vow. Bayo, it's always been a pleasure having you with us on Newspaper Review.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll see you soon again.
I enjoyed the company of the ladies today. You are taking over.
No, we're not taking over. We are complementing the men's efforts.
Yes.
Right. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, in a short while, we'll begin discussion on our subject matter. Don't go away.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
And to begin our discussion on the subject matter, we have these views of Nigerians on the resurgence of Ponzi scheme put together by Victor Azul.
Ponzi scheme? No. It's no good area. I don't think a right-thinking Nigeria should try and venture into any Ponzi scheme, no matter how high or how international they try to portray it. Because with what we've experienced with MMM, I would just advise the youth to just try and see how they can get things to do with their hands, not looking for fast money.
Ponzi scheme is basically raw Peter paper, and I believe it has taught a lot of people lesson not to go for a quick rich scheme. And it's a scheme actually. They get from someone to give another person. So it's not advisable to actually go for subs like that. If you really want to make money, go for things that you can offer products and services to people. Then of course you can definitely get your money from there.
It's a game of chance. So anybody that knows the definition of a game, you should know that it's 50-50. Either you lose or you win. And like a Ponzi game, MMM, well, I don't think Nigeria have really learned. Because if they have learned, all this brain Nigeria is not far from it. And you see it on the increase. And some people are so addicted to it that they can't do anything without playing it. So I don't think they have really learned.
People need to be educated what MMM is, that it is not a viable business. It's a scheme, it's a kind of business. And in the long run, not everybody get the best. People at the latter end of it sink down. And when it gets to ground level, those who don't know their onions get to pay the price terribly. So Nigerians, please, there are other interesting investments. If you think you want to do MM, you have the mind, you like quick things, sharp. I wish you all the best.
They should learn by their experience. Those who have fallen victim will learn by their experience. People like us will learn by others' experience.
It's more like a quick money sort of scheme, and then there's no always a guarantee that you get your money back. So if you're among the first set, you're lucky enough to get your money. But then those are the other down parts are not fortunate enough to get their money. So I think it's not a well-prepared system. So people are not advised to venture on it except you're among the first sets.
Now joining us in the studio to discuss the topic is Charles Udora, former Executive Commissioner, Legal and Enforcement, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. He is currently a private legal practitioner. Good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And also in the studio here with us is Ogbona Ukuku, an investment and economic development expert. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
All right, thank you for having me.
All right, let's go to Lagos. And we're being joined by Muda Yusuf. He's a familiar face. Yeah, there he is, Mr. Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. Good to have you with us this morning, Mr. Yusuf.
And good morning, Nigeria.
Right, and we also have a financial expert joining us from our Kaduna studio, if we have him there, Shuaibu Idris. Madam Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigerians, and thanks for having me.
So, gentlemen, let's get on with our conversation, and we'll start off with Charles Udora. Of course, you've had a stint with the SEC. So, Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme, loan money now, all this. Could you put them into perspectives? What are these schemes all about?
Well, like the general understanding is a simple scheme of robbing Peter to pay Paul.
All of them?
All of them are the same. The structure of the scheme is a contraption set up basically to defraud people. The whole idea is to create an impression that there's a business sitting out somewhere where people's money will be invested and then yield humongous returns. At the end of the day, what they do is, as people deposit money with them, they collect and pay back the first set of depositors and continue in that scheme. That's how the name pyramid scheme came about. The first layer, a second layer collects and pays the first one. Another layer collects and pays the other one. They continue like that until it bursts. And it bursts at the moment when there is a little crack. Once they are not able to collect enough to pay those ones they are owing, then the bubble bursts and they just fill into thin air. So it is a fraudulent contraption, not meant to achieve any major purpose, but for the purpose of those who set it up to defraud. And the last set of contributors are usually those who are dug in and who lose their money, absolutely.
Okay. So,
and it's called Ponzi scheme, of course, because the first of that kind was done by one Charles Ponzi, an Italian immigrant, Italian-American in the 1920s. He set up some kind of a business or supposed business that will deal on arbitrage. And the arbitrage he was going to deal on was convincing people that you could buy stamps in Europe, and then in the US, the prices are higher. And then when you sell, the difference between the costs in Europe and in the US is the arbitrage. And that's where you make money from. But come on, which business are you going to invest money and make the kind of returns they promise people? When you know the exchange rate in the banks, when you know the interest rate in the banks, the commercial rate of interest when you borrow, and you know the interest you get when you deposit. I mean, when you weigh all that, then you know exactly that you're in for a fraud. So it takes a stupid person or a greedy man to fall victim.
Mr. Ogbona, let's have your opening comments on the scheme.
On the scheme, for me, it's just, I call it desperate measures. And then when you have, few opportunities, and then people, first things first, people that don't see opportunities they don't see other opportunities, they begin to look for how to do anything available just to increase their income or, just to sustain. But having said that, it really doesn't add up when you're hearing a story from someone who you don't even know what kind of transaction the person is going into, and then you want to fall for that kind of story. So it goes to show that there is really a foundational issue when it comes to the training that we get as a people. Now, first things first, man by nature always will look for more because of the way man is, the way God created man. You always want to explore, you want to have more. But I noticed that if you see the countries that these things have happened, apart from the one that happened in like the Charles Ponzi he spoke about, countries like Lesotho, Colombia, you see countries like Albania. So these are countries, you see there are similarities with those kind of countries that are not so doing well, and you don't find a lot of opportunities in those countries. So you find people going into this kind of schemes because they don't have what else to do. Then if you bring it back to what happened here, some few years ago with the MMM thing, you realize that it was just greed that made a lot of people go into that. And number two, lack of information, which is where I was going to when I was talking about the foundation of our training foundation. We are meant to see things from not the process, but from the what I call a miracle mindset. I use that because if you are taught from your basic educational, well, that's when you're growing up, how to believe that miracles happen. You grow with that at the back of your mind. And when at that formative age, you believe in miracles. So process leaves you. So you begin at every point in time, when someone tells you something, adding with the fact that you also believe in miracles and you don't believe in process. So that miracle mindset will allow you invest in something that would give you that big break without a process. So it goes to show that our educational curriculum we have to look into it to begin to help people understand that everything in life is about a process. I'll give you a very simple example. The story in the Bible that David killed Goliath is much more of a man who has a skill that knows how to throw stones than more than, the story is always being told of how, the small pebble brought him down. But the real story, the skill behind him being able to throw, how to aim. So for me, it goes to show that we need to do something about how we train our people.
Okay, let's pause you for a while and get other perspectives. Of course, Muda Yusuf is in Lagos. Mr. Yusuf, I like for you to give us an understanding, even before we look at the processes or the type of people who patronize them. Pyramid scheme, Ponzi scheme, Bitcom, loan money now, all of this. Do they fall within the concept of multi-level marketing plans?
Thank you very much. I don't believe so. As the guests in the studio have said, this is essentially a scam. It's a scheme that is a scam, and it should be seen as such. We need to look at a number of dimensions. First, there is the criminal intent of some of the promoters or the promoters of the scheme. So we need to situate it within the context of the intention of criminality. That is one. Secondly, there is the dimension of the ignorance or the gullibility of many Nigerians. We're a country of over 200 million, about 200 million people. Naturally and statistically, you always find a percentage of the population that will be gullible. You find a percentage of population that will be greedy. So no matter how many times people fall victim, no matter the number of casualties we record, there will always be people that will fall prey to this kind of situation. So the general outlook or disposition of some Nigerians also creates the environment for this to happen. Another dimension is the regulatory framework. in the business environment, there will always be people with predatory mindsets. There will always be people who have the intention to exploit people. That is why in any society you have institutions and you have regulatory systems to ensure that we don't allow these kind of things to thrive. Fourthly, is the dimension of enforcement. No matter how good a regulation is, if you don't have the machinery or the framework for effective enforcement, then we'll have a problem as a society. So these are the key dimensions that we should begin to interrogate in matters like this. Of course, we have to enlighten people, but more importantly, you need effective regulatory system, you need effective institutions to ensure that businesses don't take advantage of people. That is why all over the world, there are always regulations around things like this. People will always want to misbehave. People will always want to exploit other people. I mean, it's a natural tendency across the world. But what threatens or what keeps people into line, what keeps people in check in the business environment is the regulatory environment, is the enforcement framework. So in dealing with these matters, I think we need to deal with it across all these critical dimensions that I've mentioned. I think that is the way to look at this matter.
Okay, Mr. Muda, what continues to concern me is why they think Africa, or especially Nigeria, is a fertile land for this kind of schemes. And what are the factors influencing people to go into Ponzi schemes?
Well, I don't think it's peculiar to Nigeria. It's something that can happen anywhere in the world, and it has been happening anyway. First, when people, just as your guest in the studio also said, when there is this disposition for quick money, when there is this tendency for shortcuts, when people have a greedy mindset, these kind of things will always thrive because of that kind of mindset. Then when you also have an economy where people are struggling for survival, where issues of hopelessness, issues of challenges of day-to-day living, when you have such preponderance of that, it also predisposes people to this kind of situation. I mean, you can see over the last 1 or 2 years, the rise, the boom in the betting, in the game industry, betting industry, the industry is growing by the day. And apparently, there is no check. Even our youths, unfortunately, younger generation, young people are now falling into this. You know? So we need to ensure that we also, have the kind of framework and sensitization to ensure that people don't develop and continue to develop this kind of mindset. But more importantly, there is need for very strong regulatory measures against things like this Ponzi scheme, against even pool betting. The betting games is increasingly becoming popular. And it's even more disturbing because increasingly a lot of our youth are falling into it. And there is nobody checking all of this. We don't just have to see these things just as a business. If you have any business enterprise or business endeavor that is creating, that is causing, that is corrupting the system, that is corrupting our youth, that is corrupting the citizens, somebody has to put a check to it. So that is what I think is happening. People want to liberate themselves from economic challenges, and people are looking for the fastest ways to do it. But we need to ensure that we don't allow those who are benefiting from this kind of thing to continue to do this kind of business.
All right, Muda, thank you. We'll get back to you. Luckily, we have Charles here, who, of course, was former executive commissioner at Securities and Exchange Commission. But let's get to Kaduna studio where we have Malam Shuaibu Idris. Malam Idris, like for you, if you recall, the last scheme, the MMM, we do know that they had website that, of course, their investors could, log on to. They also had people who fronted for them in the name of guiders. So these are, structures. How are Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes different from legal financing models?
Thank you very much, Claire. I have a little issue with bunching pyramid and Ponzi schemes together. Ponzi scheme is fundamentally different from pyramid scheme. Ponzi, posit that there is a business, a supposed business, and there is supposed to be returns from such business for which, investor will get money. While pyramid schemes just thrives on law of large number. The first 2, 3 people get contribution and give one. The next 2, 3, 5, 6 get contribution and give the next, and until it expands. And that is why it is called pyramid and not Ponzi. Now, if you allow me to come back to your question, there was MMM. That is Mabrodi Mondial Money Box as they came into Nigeria. Every one of us is familiar with the antecedents of MMM in Russia and in other Commonwealth of Independent States. That is before coming to Nigeria, because they used to be called MMM Global Worldwide. In Nigeria, when they came in 2015, and they got somewhat registration from the Corporate Affairs Commission, had a website, collected people's money, close to about 18 billion naira is reputed to have been lost by Nigerians. This data was provided by NDIC, and the same guys, when the system collapsed in December 2016, and they claimed they were coming back, by 2017, they did come back with a slightly different name and added Bitcoin. My fellow discussant, the coordinators of this discussion, can we ask ourselves a fundamental question as Nigerians? Someone came into Nigeria from Russia, defrauded our Nigerian brothers and sisters to the tune of 18 billion naira. And the same person has the audacity to come back to Nigeria and relaunch a similar scheme without any law or law enforcement agency, arresting such individuals. We need to ask, what is the role of the enforcement of, say, the Securities and Exchange Commission? Charles Odora, I don't mean to take it up on you. You're no longer in charge of enforcement, but you were there. Where are the police? Where is the State Security Service? Recently, there is also another Ponzi scheme by name Swiss Gold. The EFCC did recover close to about 250 million naira of unsuspecting Nigerians that were collected from the company called Swiss Gold. Still, this company called Swiss Gold is still operating. I mean, the newspapers have done justice to some of this. I mean, the media has done justice to this topic by highlighting not less than 15 to 20 different Ponzi schemes in Nigeria. Yes, the Corporate Affairs Commission may have inadvertently registered some of these organizations with the intent of, starting a decent business, and somewhere along the line they derail and begin to defraud Nigerians. I think there are more than 15, 20. I think Daily Trust of yesterday did mention about 5 to 7 of them, from Clarita to Naira Donation to 247 Global, and name them. We are still sitting down to discuss about this issue, and the law enforcement agencies are allowing these guys to continuously defraud unsuspecting Nigerians. I think we need to do something. If you ask me, why are Nigerians doing this? We need to go back to history. What do I mean? How is wealth created? Generally, people labor, we sweat, then we do savings, and when you save, then you invest. Now, some of us have either saved from our salaries or we went to farm and sweated our skin and maybe made maize or guinea corn or soybeans and sold, and we are trying to invest our money so that we can create wealth. The country appears to have near lack of investment channels. Yes, it's not that they are not there, but the education of where and how should Nigerians invest their money so that they can create wealth, there is still a bit of a lacuna. Unless otherwise we address that, the ignorant Nigerians, the unsuspecting Nigerians, the greedy Nigerians will easily fall prey into some of these, schemes that are offering, mouth-watering returns. Some of them are offering you 100% return of your money in 1 month. I mean, even armed robbery couldn't be as lucrative as Ponzi scheme are positing returns.
All right, Shaibu, thank you. Just before we come back to Abuja, Jume, you have a question for Muda?
Yes, for Muda again. I think we'll be coming back to you because we hear you believing early. Sometimes early this year, the Security and Exchange Commission through the federal government says series of strategies have already been put in place, perfected to flush out illegal lottery operations, especially the Ponzi scheme from the country. Do we have any progress in that aspect?
Well, I don't think there is much progress because generally many of our regulatory institutions, particularly in this space, are very weak. And even where regulatory institutions are not weak, the capacity to enforce, the capacity to ensure that there are sanctions is also very weak. Because it's even one thing for the regulator to either arrest. When it comes to issues of prosecution and all of that, the processes can be very, very frustrating. Because we have these issues not just in the this Ponzi scheme space or the lottery case, even in the issues of standards. Because when you have fraudulent people, they exist across the broad spectrum of the business community. We have people who are into importation of fake drugs, substandard drugs, smuggling of products, and things like that. It's a major economic problem across practically all sectors. But when you have a system where you don't have deterrent sanctions, then we have a problem. Because some of these things fester, just as our friend from Kaduna said, these have happened now and again, but there is no sanctions. And when you run a system where there are no consequences, this kind of problems will continue to fester. It will continue to be perpetuated. So the things that SEC had done, I don't work in SEC, but from what I can see, there is no effective sanction. There is no deterrence. And for as long as people are making money from it, of course, this thing will continue to grow. So we need to strengthen regulatory framework. We need to strengthen enforcement mechanisms and systems. We need to ensure that anybody that is engaged in this kind of things, also the probability of being caught will be high and the probability of being sanctioned will be high. The difference between our society and many of the advanced economies, sometimes it's not because the rules are not there, but it's because there are consequences for actions. When we run a system where there are no consequences for actions, whether positive or negative, you have a society that continues to deteriorate. And this is what is manifesting in this space. And let me also say this. The issue of lottery and all these betting games, the rate at which these things are grown is very, very alarming. We need very serious controls over a lot of our youth watch all this Premier League and all of that. And in the process of watching these games, these adverts come up on these football games. And in the process, a lot of our young Nigerians, a lot of youth, even students, Some of them use their school fees, their feeding allowance to go and be doing betting. So it's a big societal problem. Beyond the Ponzi scheme, we need to look at the entire space and ensure that our regulatory institutions do what they need to do. And we need to also look at our criminal justice system, because sometimes when it takes too long a time to ensure that there are sanctions for any offense, it also can be very frustrating even to the regulators. So we need to take all of these things together to ensure that we bring sanity to this environment and we bring sanity to this space.
Muda, we might just as well maximize our time with you just before we let you go. In addition, I'd like for you to quickly tell us what basis you categorize betting and all the promotional activities, of course, by manufacturers and other network providers as, fraudulent. And SEC has, continuously issued warnings to Nigerians. So from your perspective, what more could SEC have done?
Well, the issue of promotion by the businesses is different, because as a business, if you are doing promotion, you don't have anything at stake. They say, okay, if you buy two, maybe you get one, or you do a promo, you get a vehicle. If you don't get it, at least you have your product. So it is not the same thing as when you expose your hard-earned income or money and you put in a space, and at some point you lose everything. It's not exactly the same thing. But my issue, what I think SEC needs to do more, if there's an institutional capacity problem, it has to be addressed. Because these things require effective monitoring of the totality of the investment space. All these people who call them finance companies, investment companies, consultants, we need effective monitoring. And if perhaps SEC doesn't have the capacity to effectively monitor, then we need to scale up the capacity of SEC. And beyond that, we need to ensure that we have sanctions. I keep saying it. If you have a society where there are no consequences, and immediate and effective consequences for bad behavior, the society cannot progress. So what is happening here is also happening in other spheres of our national life. So SEC and other regulatory institutions need to ensure that they have the capacity to do this. If the capacity for monitoring is not there, we have to make sure that they have the capacity to monitor effectively. If the capacity to ensure that there are sanctions are not there, we need to look at our systems to ensure that there are sanctions. So it's a question of capacity for monitoring. It's a question of, ensuring that the system is such that there is effective sanctions for all of these behaviors. And we need to effectively regulate this issue of gaming and lottery, because I'm worried at the rate at which this industry is growing. It's not good for our society.
Mr. Muda, these schemes usually evolve into different types, without the name that they were using before. So what are the red flags Nigerians need to look into to be safe from this kind of Ponzi schemes?
We have to, when something is too good, then one needs to be very careful. We had our investment analyst in the studio. When you do business, genuine business in this environment, you know the kind of returns you expect from a genuine business. You are talking of maybe 10%, 15%, thereabouts, in terms of return on investment. When the return on investment is getting to 20, 50, 100%, then somebody has to worry, unless the person is also greedy. So if the returns is too attractive, if it is too good, I think it's something to watch out for. Because when people have offering a 50% return, 20% return every month and things like that, of course these things are not sustainable. So people need to worry about this kind of attractive returns. I think that is the most important thing. But again, there has to be proper education. But more importantly, I keep emphasizing, we need to strengthen our regulatory framework. That is very important in my view.
All right, thank you, Muda. Let's get back now to Charles here. Charles, Muda has raised a whole lot of issues, both from, strengthening regulatory capacity. But let me, take you back again to some of the issues he's raised. 50% You promise 50%, returns on whatever you have made within a time frame of, say, a month and all that. Could you explain to us what revenue stream that, such schemes have? What is the category of investors, that patronize them?
It goes back to what we started with. Greed, ignorance, and downright stupidity. Let me start by saying, if you put your money in a savings account in a bank, you may manage to get 3%. If you do fixed deposit, you may manage to get 6 to 7%. If you go to the bank to borrow money, you get it at 24%. Interbank borrowing ranges from anywhere 12, 14%. Now, where on earth do you think the person you're giving money is going to put it and generate 50% to give you after generating enough for the cost of running the business? Because depending on the kind of business he is promising you he's doing, he has to have staff. There are bills to be paid. There are taxes to be paid. In our climb, you are running a business, you must run a generator. You have to run water supply. You have to run security. So after all these costs built in a business, the business still has enough to sustain itself, pay the owners of the business, and give you 50%, then you must be stupid. Because it doesn't happen anywhere. And that's why this whole thing ends up in people collecting. That's why we call it rob Peter to people. All they just do is keep collecting and paying other people. As long as there's a constant flow of that income, they keep paying those who they've collected from until there's a break. And that's the similarity between the Ponzi and the pyramid, because it's all the same. The difference being that, somebody is pretending to be doing a business. But the truth is that he's not doing any business. The other one is, from day one, he's collecting from A to pay B. The same system. So it is downright stupid. There's no business. I don't know the lucrative business in this country or beyond our shores that can give you that level of return. So to that extent, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, let me put to Ogbonna. Ogbonna, you're a financial analyst. I'm told that there's a difference between plans, financial models that require investors or that promise investors returns based on the number of recruits or distributorship, and plans that promise you payment based on sales. Okay. So can you explain that and how it differs from the Ponzi scheme and pyramid scheme?
Okay, I think that's basically network marketing. Okay, that's taking advantage of the person that is going to sell your product. So you just tell the person you earn more when you bring in 2-3 people. It's just like, go and evangelize about this product. So pretty much there's a product that is being sold here. So there's a difference here because you're selling and you want to expand your market front line by using, your what I call your contact management. So because, for you now, if you have a phone now, you have a phone book contact. Then for you to manage that, you can say, okay, how many people out of my contact can buy this product? Because if they buy this product, I'm going to earn so amount of money from the owners of the product. So I think it's a far different, you can actually differentiate between both of them, because this one you are selling a product and the other one you're just, you're just in a roller coaster. Nothing is really happening. You are made to believe that something is happening, and then at the end of the day, nothing happens, and then the bubble bursts, and then everybody starts to cry. So pretty much, marketing is just a model. It's a marketing model which was actually initiated by some people from, I think it started from Asia, and then is worked because they look at places where they have large population, And then for you to get across to the next person, you need to get the person to bring more people than the next person will bring and all of that. So the more people you bring, the more money you earn, like commissions that you get, not like you're investing money to earn money. And if you notice, most of those particular schemes also have products that they are selling. So I think it's a very different thing.
I asked a question earlier on about red flag.
Yes.
Now, could this be one of the red flags for people to take note of when a scheme says, look, I promise you so based on the number of recruits you make? Could that be the red flag?
If you are recruiting for a product, two things you must look at. What product? Does it have all the regulatory endorsements? If the products don't, now you begin, that's the first red flag. If the product is harmful to mankind, it's a red flag. If this product is not good for consumption or not good for anybody, so it's a red flag, then that brings me to the fact that we need to do much more than just seeing a product. We need to do a research to find out more about this product. And if you go, for young people, the time you spend on the internet trying to do the betting and all of that, you can actually use your Google to find out more about this product. If you go into Google and then you are not getting as much information as you should get, that's enough for you to just stop and say, no, I can't bring in somebody to come and use a product or bring someone to come and buy a product that I'm not sure of. So there has to be standards to, being able to, bring in someone. So if it's just recruiting for no just cause, then there's a red flag. But if it's recruitment for a product, now the red flag is halfway, then you do your research. If the research gives you something that you can't, is leading you nowhere, just let it be and then don't touch it. That's a red flag.
That's a serious one, actually. Mr. Charles, I will come to you now with the next question. You've worked with the SEC before, and it has undertaken a number of initiatives to boost investors' confidence, including the National Investment Protection Fund, which is to ensure that people do not fall victim to the antics of fraudsters. Have we had any inroads into that?
Well, the National Investor Protection Fund is not for people who invest in Ponzi schemes.
Okay.
The fund is meant for people who invest in real regulated authorized markets. Okay. Like if you're buying securities in the market, yes, either from the secondary market or from the primary issues, and there's a problem down the line, there's a failure. That's what we call, failed trades. And where there are issues concerning either the broker or the market itself or the issuer of the securities, then the Investor Protection Fund comes in to assuage your loss, to compensate, not necessarily to pay you 100%. It's a form of a compensation scheme, okay, for those who invest in legal markets.
And the reason why I asked that question is, during my research last night, I came across some questions that why can't these schemes be registered so that they can be regulated?
Good question. Yes. Very good question. There are provisions in the Investment and Securities Act for registering investments. Part 6 of this act, authorizes SEC to register market operators. And those include fund managers, asset managers, and the likes. You can see what the Ponzi schemes and the pyramid schemes pretend to do are forms of fund management. Yes. But they are not registered. The law says you must be registered to carry out any investment business in Nigeria and give SEC under Section 13 the authority to register such people and to regulate such people and to sanction such people. Now, the next stage is Part 8 of this act. Authorizes SEC to register the instruments that you are issuing, the securities, the products that you are selling, like shares, debentures, and all those things. And then, so you first of all have to be registered as the operator, and then what you are selling also has to be registered. Those are not the issues. They are not the problems.
But does SEC have rules outlawing Ponzi schemes? Because we do know that, if you listen to especially the radio stations,
Yes.
you hear a lot of people during the MMM period.
Yes.
Their guiders were all over this, the media houses, social media,
Yes.
Propagating this,
It's a
schemes.
simple thing. SEC has always told people, even they are still saying it till tomorrow. When anybody calls you to invest money, check whether that person is registered by SEC. That's the first thing. If it's not an institution or a person registered by SEC, do not touch it. That's a simple thing. It's there. It's outlawed by law. Says if you don't register this business, you cannot do it. But you see, Muda raised a couple of very, very good, very, very, very salient issues. The real issue about Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme, Bitcoin, and a lot more are coming up sits on a tripod. The regulatory framework, the institutions, the law enforcement, and the judicial system. These three arms of our system must work in coordination to root out any form of fraud in the system. Not just the capital market, not just the investment space, in any area. You see, no matter how strong, and I agree with him, if SEC lacks capacity, government should look at it. Because for goodness sake, I think an audit, a staff audit of SEC needs to be done. Find out who is sitting where, doing what level of qualification and experience and exposure do you have. It's important. Because it doesn't make sense, you're growing in the system and you've not really earned much experience in the system, and you are pushed to man a very, very sensitive seat. It's a problem. Now, I will give you an example. When I was in SEC, I initiated the setting up of a capital market desk in the EFCC. Started as far back as when Lamode then was the director of operations. I initiated the setting up of a police unit in SEC.
Okay, Charles, I'm sorry. I will just put you on hold.
Yes.
We need to, go to Lagos because Muda will leave us in a couple of minutes from now. Muda, if you're still with us, Charles here talked about the fact that there is a rule, asking market, financiers to register with SEC. What if Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme, Bitcoin did register with SEC? Does that make it any more, does it remove the fact that it is still a scam, a financial, scam scheme?
Yes, even if these things are registered, if there is effective monitoring, you should be able to distinguish what is a scam and what is genuine fund management business. I mean, we have all reviewed the kind of impossible returns that some of these people are promising. So the fact that you register does not confer legitimacy or validity on the kind of products that you are churning out. And that's why we agree with him. I think there's a major capacity issue in the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's a major capacity issue. We cannot push all this burden on the citizens. Because naturally, when people are under pressure and they face these temptations, they will fall for them. What is more important, and that is why we have government, that is why we have institutions to protect the citizens against this kind of practices. Now, he brought out a publication there that contains excellent laws and regulations that stipulates what every operator must do in order to ensure that we are doing legal business. But how many of that thing is happening in terms of enforcement? The enforcement is almost nil. I don't know how many, we have had this experience over the years. How many people have actually been brought to book? How many people have, how many companies have SEC actually prosecuted? These are the issues. So this goes back to institutional capacity. Capacity to ensure that the right things are done and we clean up this space. So I think SEC is weak in that area from all indications. And what is important is for us to ensure that the rules are there. From what he has told us, he is in a better position. But now, how much of those rules are being enforced? How much of monitoring is taking place? How many people have been sanctioned? These are the key issues. So it goes back to the issue of capacity and issue of strengthening our institutions. That is what I think is paramount in this case.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Muda. Yusuf, for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. You have an appointment right now. We'll let you go. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Okay, back now here in the studio, Mr. Ogbonna Okoko, as we begin to wind down on the conversation, what measures should be put in place to ensure that things like that, Nigerians are educated, enlightened, and informed about this kind of Ponzi schemes?
Yeah, it goes beyond informing Nigerians. Everybody, that we have to expand the investment space so that people will see alternatives and the opportunities in the country. I say this, enterprise development model in every clime rises and falls on 5 pillars. Number 1, skilled manpower. You must have trained skilled manpower that will have the capacity to run enterprises. 2, you must have what I call sector-specific technology acquisition system, which is things that you don't have, being able to bring them in and adapt to it. 3 will be your raw material supply strategy. Now, where agriculture and co will come in. So you must have a good system when it comes to supporting the industries, which is being able to get your raw materials. It might interest you to know. I always use a very simple example on this number 3 issue. Everything, do you know that simple candy like Tom Tom is basically imported? I say this because Tom Tom is made up of 3 items: glucose syrup, coloration, and flavoring. These 3 things I mentioned, you don't find them in Nigeria. And guess what? 80% of that is the glucose syrup. Where does it come from? It comes from cassava, it comes from corn. So you see, until we begin to go back to our backward integration, so anybody that sees a product and says, oh, this is made, no, it's actually assembled in Nigeria, not made in Nigeria. So that is still talking about raw material supply strategy. Then number 4, you have to look at your project development and your financial engineering model. This is where we always have a big issue. Everybody talks about access to finance so that we can invest in businesses. Access to finance is not the same as access to capital. Capital in the sense that for me to even walk into a bank, I must be ready for the bank to finance me. And before I'll be ready for a bank to finance me, that means I would have spent some level of money. And the banks will at least always ask me, where is your own contribution if you believe so much in this business? So that means we have to get our venture capital system to start working in Nigeria, whether government or private sector. Then the last one, which would be the market development. Now, we have a large population. Everybody talks about our large population. But a population that does not have the capacity to buy products is nothing but just people. So you need to increase the financial income capacity of every person that exists in this particular economic sphere. So now, having put that in proper perspective, so what we need to do is to see how we can expand what it takes for opportunities to be there for people to do business. Now, I started making the news when there was a ban on, President issued a directive that they shouldn't give forex FX to those who are importing food. Yes. And then people were crying. I said, no, it's actually the best way to go, because if you don't take that decision, yes, it's going to hurt a bit. But if you don't take that decision, people will not go back to begin to think of what to do so that we can get our farms to start to work.
Somebody says these kind of policies are churned out all the time, but implementation is the problem. We'll come back to you now when we work on that when we go to Kaduna Claire.
Okay, thank you, Jume. Let's bring in Malam Shuaibu Idris. Malam Idris, again, let's look at how these schemes can be checkmated. But of course, unfortunately, they are not registered with SEC. They're not registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. The operators closed, group. How is it possible to track them down, regulate them?
Thank you very much. Before I answer your question, I think I need to draw our attention to be a little bit careful with some of the comments our dear brother and colleague Muda Yusuf said. You see, gambling or game of chance or betting companies that are operating in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, majority of them are registered with the National Lottery Regulatory Commission. So they cannot, and we must not bundle them with Ponzi schemes. The world over, game of chance is something that is allowed, and government do make money from that. As regards the efforts of the regulatory authorities, I think also we need to give credence to particularly Barrister Charles Udora and his team when he was in Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the efforts of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the NDIC in terms of regular publicity as to drawing the attention of Nigerians to be careful of these schemes. Charles, if you remember, there is still in existence in this country an institution called Investment and Securities Tribunal. You were a part of those who saw the birth of that, tribunal that has, a high court, status in Nigeria. Defrauders of Nigerians under Ponzi schemes may be tried, and expeditiously, justice could be meted to them if found guilty or wanting. It is practically impossible for any one of us to expect SEC to do miracle or to perform magic. Can the Nigerian police today man each and every one of us? The answer is no. The very best they can do is to educate Nigerians, be wary, beware, and when in doubt, consult either a lawyer or your investment advisor. Finally, as at today, I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Investors Protection Fund, and thank you very much for the education that you've shared, Charles, as regards to what the Investors Protection Fund is all about. Claire, I think on a final note, as regards my talking contribution on this subject matter is fundamentally government needs to do more. There are certain ways and things that government is acting or not acting which portrays a level of a docility or a level of I don't care attitude. Let me give you one or two examples. The Central Bank of Nigeria is supposed to have a governing board. The Central Bank did stay for almost 3 to 4 years without a governing board constituted. Securities and Exchange Commission is supposed to have a board. The SEC did stay for more than 2.5 years, 3 years without a board. Is that a mechanism that shows some level of seriousness for the regulatory authorities to man the investment space of this country? As at today, the SEC does not have a substantive director general. It's been, someone has been acting for the last 2.5 years. For how long will we continue to have people acting in one capacity or another? When Udora, you are making a recommendation that there should be a bit of a staff audit. When you don't have a substantive leadership, how do you even begin to audit? Where do you start? So government need to take certain drastic measures to show that, yes, there is need to police, the investment climb of this country so that Nigerians can be protected. And again, last but not the least, we need the Corporate Affairs Commission to go beyond just somebody submitting his or her name and address and saying, I want to register a company, and then he or she is given the license or the permission to register a company. Why will you have, say, a Sergei Mabrodi, who everybody knew that as far back as 1989 has been declared a fraudster, and he came to Nigeria to register MMM? How is it possible? What kind of surveillance, what kind of enforcement, what kind of regulation are we having in this country that people of questionable character that are known worldwide, at the touch of a button you can Google somebody's name and you will get the antecedent and a profile of a fraudster? Why are we not doing that? Why are we just registering rascals, fraudsters, thieves, and then they are ruining our country? I think the earlier we somehow buckle our belt to implement quality regulations, the better for everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muda Yusuf, for your contribution. We'll get back to you on your... Okay, sorry. Shaibu Idris, on your contribution. We'll get back to you before the program runs up, but we'll take a break right now. When we come back, GMN continues.
Now, the red light won't kill you. Move now.
To the disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say, I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're looking at the resurgence of Ponzi scheme, this time in another name. They've come in different names, but we've got a number of tweets here. We'll quickly take them and then get on with the concluding part of our conversation. Let's begin with Dele Jack Solomon, and he tweets, people must be told and conscientized that there is no way to miracle or wonder money. They must be informed that there is no way to quick money, but through hard work, they can be financially stable. We implore Nigerians to resist the temptation that comes with Ponzi scheme.
And Mike Ayako tweets that the Ponzi scheme re-emerged in the country is obvious evidence that the perpetrators of the treacherous acts before went scot-free from prosecution and possible imprisonment. This is real economic sabotage against the masses and must not be handled with levity.
And Law Alpha C tweets, some Nigerians who were victims of the notorious Ponzi scheme recently are yet to recover from the trauma, while some have died. NOA and some government agencies have been educating people on this matter, even now.
And Titus Mondenok tweets, I see Ponzi schemes in whatever form or name as a fraud, and anti-fraud and other relevant agencies need to take them out of business.
Amino Uba Hassan tweets, youths are the driving force of every developing and developed nation. To invest in youth is to invest in our future. While MMM, lotteries, sports bets, etc. should be discouraged, ITF, NDE, SMEs, agric and education loans should be enhanced. God bless Nigeria.
And from First News, Akimboewa, since Ponzi schemes are unsustainable and illegal, Nigerian government must crack down on its perpetrators.
And Bolanho Babs, as long as Nigerians are still lost in the cradle of get-rich-quick syndrome, Ponzi schemes will continue to live with us.
And Sani Michael Omokoji tweets, for those who think Ponzi schemes are a quick way of getting rich, perhaps the aftermath of MMM is not enough to teach them a lesson that there is no shortcut to getting rich other than hard work.
Ahmed Ibrahim Idris, care must be taken before making an investment. Perhaps interest is what matters in any investment, but it is also important to rely on appropriate investments that will not make you lose money, but rather make you gain. Nigerians should beware of fraudsters.
And Akeju Olagbaju tweets, the scheme is conceptualized here in Nigeria to defraud greedy Nigerians. The Depositors Fund was to be invested with little profits shared between operators and depositors. Rather, it was manipulated as predatory machinery.
All right, and we have tweets again coming from Gbolahan has a second one. And Afasi also has a second tweet. Fregene Godfrey says, all what I understand about the people that invest in Ponzi scheme is laziness and greed for quick riches without stress.
And Abdulaziz Abdurraouf tweets, getting rich by chance or game is allowed all over the world. That's why we have lottery. Las Vegas in America is prominent for betting and chance enrichment. Leave betting out of Ponzi schemes.
Adams B, that's the last but not the least tweets here. This program is very educative, addressing critical issues for national development and growth, but I advise viewers should be given opportunity to call in and contribute to the program. Adams, thank you. I'm sure
yes, today? Yeah.
of course, we'll convey your messages and keep the tweets coming in. Now, let us take some of the issues that the tweets have raised. One, again, is the mindset of you raised that issue earlier on, Ubuna, about people wanting to get rich quick and this miracle of how can we change the mentality of this category of people?
One of the best ways for me is, like I said earlier, begin to look at our primary school curriculum. Emphasize more on process and results, than how they can apply whatever they are learning into getting results. Then again, number two, we need to also look at, getting our people, because people follow what they see. Now, it is very clear that in Nigeria today, I don't know about other climes, a man can be poor today in Nigeria, not through Ponzi scheme or through any of these schemes, becomes rich. You can't replicate billionaires in Nigeria, you can't. Because there's always a gap, a dark side of everybody's story. There are no exceptions here, I can tell you. Someone like Steve Jobs on the Mark Zuckerberg, you could see that they all follow a trend. One created this, one looked up to this one and followed and created a similar thing and made more money. Okay, now if you want to replicate, for example, Dangote, what do you do? What I'm just saying is everybody in this, there has to be a way where you make everybody, there has to be a sequence to income generation where I can actually say, this is how this man made money. I would like to be like this man, so let me make money the same way. And again, it's also very critical for us to understand that we emphasize so much on certificates in Nigeria as against certificate. What you get from formal education is certificate, and what you get from informal education is certificate. If you wanted an accountant today, it's a certificate that he will bring.
Yes.
But if you want a plumber to do a work in your house, it is the result. If the leakage stops in your house, that is when you will say that is a plumber.
Yes.
So it goes to show that there has to be a reverse. We have to reverse the way we see things as a people. So policies from government would be able to make that happen. And then going further, we also have to regulate the way people make money and how they make money. We need to, because Oxfam came up with a research last year. Say the entire wealth in the world reside in the hands of 1% of the population. If you bring that to Nigeria, the entire wealth of Nigeria reside in the hands of 0.0001% of Nigerians. Then again, PwC, just earlier this year, I think it was in July, came up with a report and said, in Nigeria, you have $900 billion worth of dead capitals. Dead capital meaning that you have a lot of structures that are not working. Money is meant to work. if you don't put money to work, you can't expand your economy. So I think government should go further, not just chasing people who have stolen money, but make sure that the system will give back. If you make money today, there has to be a way where you will give back to the society. Not CSR, not just taxes. There has to be some deliberate, arm twisting. Let me use the word arm twisting because we're not used to it, to make people support the system, and then enterprise development will grow in Nigeria.
Such as what some private businessmen are doing in terms of entrepreneurship.
Trying to support the Tony Elumelu Foundation. Yes. And so, I mean, if you have, I think there should even be a fund created to support enterprise. If you make a particular amount of money, you should be able to contribute to that fund. If you are a billionaire today, the system will get you to contribute to that fund because the system made you rich. So you have to put back to the system because somebody has to replace you. Yeah. We have to be able to grow other people who will become the Dangotes, the Tony Elumelus. So there has to be a way to make that happen.
But Obunna, Charles, giving back to the system, would it address, the mentality of people who, patronize these schemes, without calculating the risk involved?
Fine, I will answer that, but let me just use this opportunity to correct one impression. The Investment and Securities Act, if we remember our friend from Kaduna, does not have criminal jurisdiction. It's only civil jurisdiction. So they can't try anybody for any offense. It's one of the issues that have been raised in a new bill that have been crafted. The SEC set up a committee that reviewed the entire laws and crafted a new bill. Okay. One of the suggestions is that the IST should be given a criminal jurisdiction so that everything in the investment space can be tried there. So back to your... Now, we need value reorientation. We need value reorientation. And by that, I mean part of what my colleague here said, that the country has to begin to recognize people who achieve things, not necessarily making money. There are various levels of achievements. Time was when you recognize teachers, recognize doctors, recognize all that. For you to force people to contribute money, back to society and give it to entrepreneurs or make it available for entrepreneurship scheme, that's very good. But if you sit down with these businessmen and talk to them, they will not smile at what you have just said. Because they will tell you that it's not after suffering to provide electricity, suffering to provide security, suffering to provide roads, water, and virtually everything done by himself. And then some group of lazy crabs sit down there waiting for his money to be thrown at them. So I think it's a good suggestion, but government needs to do its own bit. And that is provide the basic infrastructure that helps businesses to run. I'll give you an example. Just let electricity run, have light for 16 hours a day only, and watch out what our GDP will be. As I'm talking to you now, quite a number of tailors, artisans, mechanics, or name them, are sitting idle. Because a lot of the things they're supposed to do require electricity. Yes. They can't afford generating sets, so they are not producing. Very key.
And when you don't produce, you're idle.
You're idle.
Your mind.
So even if you give him money, what is he going to do with the money? Marry another wife? Because there's nothing to throw the money into. So those are some of the critical issues about infrastructure. We need that. And then the mindset, a thief is a thief, no matter how you do. We've talked about changing prison service to correctional service. Fine. Some people go there with all the facilities provided in the prisons to train them. The next week you bring them out, they are back to robbery. Not because they've not been provided correctional, it's the mindset. So here, we hail wealth, no matter how it is made. It's the beginning of our problems. Let us downplay riches and play up intellectual achievements, creativity. Let's praise those who create, not those who just wake up and have money. We worship money in this country. You can pass through any system in this country when you have money. But you don't have money if you have 10 degrees and 5 professorial seats, you are nothing.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Charles Udora. We'll now go to Kaduna, where Shaibu Idris is waiting to give us his closing remarks on this topic.
Thank you very much, Jumai. I think virtually the few areas that we need to cover has been covered. I take the correction Mr. Odora has given on the issue of the criminality aspect of inability of Investment and Securities Tribunal to try, offenders. But I think on a final note, we all need to put our acts in order and not to push everything in the hands of government. Ponzi schemes, the near absence of investment outlet where people could invest might be the reasons why Nigerians are pushed to Ponzi schemes. So we need to educate our neighbors and such that people will get to understand that you don't necessarily have to invest in a company. You could invest in your neighbor's business, you could invest in your brother's business or your sister's business, and together you can grow. And gradually crowdfunding is becoming a norm in Nigeria. So there are quite a number of crowdfunding agencies that people could look at. In addition, the stock market has largely rebounded. The excesses or the greed of the 2007, 2008, 2009, where Nigerians lost a lot of money, I think that has been put to history, and some checks and balances, have been put in place. So Nigerians should consider investing in legitimate businesses that are run fairly decently, so that their capital will be secured and they can get some returns. Finally, I think we should also be careful not to align the network marketing with Ponzi scheme. Forever Living Product, GNLD, and all those network marketing organizations, like Ogbonna said, have an underlying product they are selling. Why are they giving commission to network marketers? Is because they don't spend money in advertising or in marketing their products. So the money they are saving from advertising on the pages of newspaper or radio station or television station is what they now give back to the agent that market their product by way of mouth. So that is what distinguishes them from Ponzi scheme. So we need to be careful so that some of them don't feel that we are bunching them together with fraudsters. When, like I did say, gambling or betting is a legitimate business anywhere in the world. Thank you once again for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
Thank you so much, Shaibu Idris, a financial analyst in our Kaduna studio. Thank you so much for your contribution. We also thank Mr. Charles Udora, former Executive Commissioner, Legal and Enforcement, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. He is currently a private legal practitioner. Thank you so much for your comments and incisive contribution to the program. We also thank Mr. Obona Ukoku, an investment and economic development expert. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And now next, it's Sparks Update. We'll be right back.